All right, so chapter 18 is the endocrine system. I'll give you just a slight idea about the endocrine system. We will do this and we will go back to the slides. Okay, so let's understand this to save ourselves some time, so pay attention. Okay, endocrine system. In 233 or AP1, we talked about the glands. Glands are there to secrete some secretions, right? If these secretions go through a duct to the outside, to an open space or something, we call that exocrine glands. If you forgot it, I'm reminding you. Here is a gland. What's the job of the gland? Make secretions. Does this gland secrete into a duct or not? If it does, the duct will take it out. Out. Exo. Exo means out, right? So if it has a duct that take this secretion out to a space, example, the glands in the pancreas that make the pancreatic enzymes, okay? When you eat, you need enzymes, right? The enzymes will work on the food that you're eating. So where are these enzymes? Where does it come from? We will talk about the details, but just to give you an idea now. So glands are there to make secretions. In the pancreas, for example, our pancreatic juice, there are secretions that when we make it, there are ducts that will take this secretion out to the duodenum, which is the small intestine. This is a free space, right? So since you have a duct and you take the secretion out, we call those exocrine glands. Exo means out. Crine means secretion. The gland that secrete outside. Is that clear? Okay, this is if you have a duct, which is not our focus. We will talk about it later. Here is a gland making secretion, and there is a duct that open here. Okay, so you make the secretion, it goes out. So this is exocrine or endocrine? Exo. You have a duct. How about this? Here is another gland. You're making a secretion, there is no duct. So it will go endo, in between the cells, endo. Are we following? So what do you call this? That's making secretions that goes endo, in between, endocrine glands. Clear? When these secretions will go in between the glands, ultimately it will reach the bloodstream. This is the endocrine glands. And the secretion that I'm talking about is called the hormones. Are we following so far? Hormones. So we're focusing on the endocrine glands. Doesn't have a duct. We call it ductless, no duct. If there is a duct, it would have been exo, because take it out. We don't have ducts. It doesn't go out. It go endo where? In between the cells. That's why we call it endocrine. And then what? Is it going to stay in between the cells? No. It will move in between the cells. Ultimately, it will reach the capillaries and it will reach the bloodstream. Then what? In the bloodstream, they are going to go travel until it go to all the cells of the body to do some action. This action depends on the chemical nature of these hormones. Okay? And this is what I'm focusing on right now. But did you get this part? Introductory part. Did we understand it? Okay. So you make the secretion. You call it hormones. It go in between the cells, ultimately reaching the blood. The blood take it to the cells. Now, the hormones at the cells. How are you going to act there? Depending on the chemical nature of these hormones. So here it is. Some of these hormones are lipid soluble or water insoluble or hydrophobic. This is their chemical nature, okay? And others are not lipid soluble, non-lipid soluble, which means water it should be water soluble. Hydrophilic. Okay, I don't know where the mistake came from, but I will fix it. This is a non-lipid soluble. This is a hydrophilic. Please change this. Okay, and I will change it in the document. So this is hydrophilic and hydrophobic. What's the hydrophobic? Lipid soluble. Lipid soluble is hydrophobic. If you put oil in the water, does it dissolve? No, because it hates the water, right? Lipids hate the water. Phobia. hydrophobic, right? How about sugar? If you put sugar like in the water, it dissolves, right? If you put salt, it dissolves. Proteins, everything that's not lipid, it will dissolve. So anything that is not lipid is hydrophilic. It likes water and it will interact with water. So what? Here is the difference between those two. We'll group it into two groups. Here we put it as three because those two are kind of together. So what's the main theme? Chemical nature of the hormones. Is it lipid soluble or not? Lipid soluble. Hydrophobic. This is one category. Lipid insoluble. Hydrophilic. This is another category. Okay. Now, why are you differentiating in this way? Lipid soluble, hydrophobic. What happened here? Here is what happened. Do you guys remember, again, of course, you know that AP1 and AP2, it's a continuation, right? You do AP1 and then based on your understanding of AP1, we continue. Not all of everything, but a lot of it, right? So let me remind you with this. Do you remember the cells in the very, very beginning? What's the nature of the membrane? What's the main bulk, the bricks of the membrane? Lipid, phospholipid. Do you remember this? Phospholipid. So here is a hormone coming here, and this is phospholipid. And this hormone is what? Lipid soluble. So what? It will cross. It's okay to cross. Lipid cross in the lipid. Okay? So it moves in. Like if you have the key for the door, you open the door and move on. If you don't, you cannot go in. You have to ring the doorbell and wait for somebody to come to you and tell them what you need, right? You can enter to your house, but if you have a delivery, they cannot enter, right? So lipid soluble, they can go in. They don't have to stop, right? When they go in, they go all the way to the nucleus. What's the membrane of the nucleus? Also phospholipid. So you cross the membrane of the nucleus. What do we have inside the nucleus? DNA. You remember the DNA? You go to the DNA and you tell the DNA, make this protein. I am coming to you to tell you, make this protein. I am a hormone, meaning I'm a messenger, hormone. And I'm coming to you because I want you to make this hormone. DNA will make the hormone. How? Again, AP1, DNA, it will make transcription, make messenger RNA, it leaves the nucleus, go to the ribosomes outside. Do you remember this? You read the message, amino acids, and you make proteins. Do you remember this? Okay, so this is how it works. You go to the DNA inside the nucleus and tell them what to do, right? How about if this is the chemical nature of this hormone is not lipid soluble? Like what? Like amino acids. This is water soluble. Like proteins, glycoproteins. Is any one of those lipid? Is it lipid? Protein is not a lipid. Glycoprotein means sugar with protein. This is not lipid. Are you following what I mean? Okay, so if you come to this, you're going to find the phospholipid. Phospho what? Lipid. Can you cross it? No. No. You have to stop. Ring the doorbell. Let them know what you need. When they get your message, leave. You're not allowed in. Did you get my idea? So this will be another mechanism. You're going to interact with something here, G protein, that will make a second messenger and a third messenger. Ultimately, will do the same job, but in a different way. And this is the first one, the first basic understanding that we have to know. So lipid soluble. What of the hormones? We will talk about the details of the hormones. Which of the hormones is lipid in nature? Lipid soluble. Leukotrienes, prostaglandins, thromboxane, prostacyclins, steroid hormones, corticosteroid, and calcitriol. Most important of all of those are the steroid hormones. Steroid hormones, basically the reproductive hormones, the sex hormones, androgen and estrogen, right? This is one of them. And the other one is corticosteroids or cortisone, basically. But all of these are lipid soluble. So what is the mechanism of action? because these are lipid soluble, they are going to cross the membrane and they are going to work on intracellular receptors. There are receptors inside, right here. They get all the way in. Most of the time, it's in the nucleus. Occasionally, they might work on something here, but in all cases, they can cross the cell membrane. Are we following so far? Are we okay? Still concentrating? Okay. So since you are lipid soluble, you can cross the membrane. Then what? You will find a receptor that will receive the information from you inside, intracellular. Most of the time, it's in the nucleus. In the nucleus, you have a DNA, interact with the DNA, interact with the receptor, and then DNA. The DNA will do what I hope you still remember. I'm reminding you, the DNA, when you tell the DNA what you want, they say, okay, so what do you want me to do? I want you to do protein number 3, whatever it is. We don't care about the names now. Whatever the protein is. The DNA will say, okay, I'm going to make a transcript, which is messenger RNA, from this piece. And this is going to leave the nucleus and go all the way to the ribosomes. With the help of the other 2 RNA, transfer and ribosomal RNA, you're going to make the protein. And you did the job. And this is how it works. Okay? If this is not lipid soluble, what do you mean not lipid soluble? Amino acid or peptides and protein. What's the difference? Amino acid, do you guys remember that? Amino acid is like the building brick, the building unit of proteins. When you put group of amino acids together, we call that peptide. If you make it big enough and you fold it, you make a protein. So you basically you're talking about same thing, but in different levels. Amino acids, you put them together, peptides, fold it, and make it 3-dimensional, that's protein. But we put them in 2 different categories, they will work the same way. So for the mechanism of action, it's not different. It's the same thing. Because the question is, can you cross the cell membrane or not? Yes or no? If you can, this is one category. You cross, find the receptor, interact, DNA, protein, and so on. If you cannot, we're talking about the other category. Whether you are amino acid, like thyroid hormone, epinephrine, norepinephrine, dopamine, melatonin, or you are a peptide in nature or protein, it doesn't matter. You don't have to differentiate. TSH, LH, FSH, ADH, and oxytocin. Those 2 come from the posterior pituitary, and those 3 come from the anterior pituitary. So it's basically the pituitary hormones. These are the ones, anterior and posterior. These are the ones that are protein and peptides. In both cases, both of them, whether you're talking about amino acids, peptides, protein, in all cases, it does not cross the membrane. How to solve it now? They cannot cross the membrane, so they are going to interact with membrane receptor. If you don't have the key for the door, you knock on the door or push on the ring, right? So the ring is a receptor on the membrane, right? So it's a membrane receptor, and we call that the first messenger, the receptor itself. Then the second messenger. There is something called G protein that you should remember that's going to link you. This is the second messenger. So here I am reaching the cells. I wanted to enter. No, you cannot enter. You're not lipid soluble. You are the amino acid, peptide, or protein. Any one of them, you cannot enter. How to solve it? Knock on the door. Ring. Use the ring. What's a ring? This is the membrane receptor. And then what? When you buzz it, when you push on that ring, we call that ring or the receptor, the first messenger. This will lead you to the second messenger, which is called G protein. You need to remember this, G protein. And this will help you to make the second messenger. What's the second messenger? Cyclic AMP, cyclic GMP, and calcium. 3 things. This is your second messenger. You have to remember these. You cannot summarize the summary. I already summarized it. Okay? So this is what you have to know. Everything. It's already summarized. So now you got the second messenger. In all of this, did the hormone enter the cells? It didn't enter the cells, right? All what you did is interact with the receptor on the outside of the membrane and then leave. You're done. You do not enter. Then the process will follow. First messenger is the receptor, G protein, followed by second messenger, cyclic AMP, cyclic GMP, or calcium. And second messenger is going to activate an enzyme called kinase. And this kinase is going to activate some organelles, and the organelles will do the job for you. Okay, so this is what I want you to know. Is that clear? Let me summarize it real quick. If it's lipid, it cross the membrane, go inside, and do the steps that I talked about. If it is not lipid, amino acid, here are the names. Proteins or peptide, we have different names that you need to know. In both cases, it's the same mechanism. What do? I go to the membrane and stop. I can't enter. I will find the receptor, which I call it the first messenger, interact with it. This is going to work through something called G protein to make the second messenger. We have 3 of those: cyclic AMP, cyclic GMP, and calcium. All 3 different from cell to cell. They are going to activate an enzyme called kinase. And this kinase is going to activate your target organelle. And the target organelle will do the job for you. Okay? Now, thyroid hormone. Do you see this thyroid hormone? It's among these amino acids. Is it lipid soluble? It's not lipid soluble. Does it cross the membrane? No, this one does cross the membrane. It's an exception. There is a mechanism. It's not lipid soluble. How does it cross? Yes, there is an exception. Just this one. The membrane has a mechanism to hold it and push it in. It does work inside. Just this one exception. Okay? And I put it here. So a thyroid hormone is an exception. Even though it's an amino acid, it shouldn't cross. That's understandable, but it can. There is a transport mechanism in the membranes that will take it from outside and push it in. Okay? It shouldn't, but it is. This is a fact. And it acts as if it's lipid soluble. It go inside, work on the mitochondria, work on the nucleus. Same thing like the lipid transcription, messenger RNA, travel, ribosomes. Do you remember these steps? So it will work the same way. So just remember this one exception. Otherwise, epinephrine, norepinephrine, dopamine, melatonin, these are amino acids, and they work the same as all these 5 pituitary hormones. Later on, when we do the pituitary hormones, you will remember the names. Okay, for now, you still have to you still have to know it anyway. Okay, the other thing is, here is what I talked about in the beginning. I should have started with this. That's okay. Let me just go through this. So this is the first thing that I want you to know, which is what I talked about already. Exocrine versus endocrine. Exo and endo. Okay? Here is the endocrine. Does it have a duct? No. It goes in between the cells. Look at this blood, red. It will reach the blood cells. We call it a hormone. And it travels until it reaches the target cells. There are other things that I want you to know as well. This is not the only communication. I talked about the exocrine, right? Travel through a duct, and it will also communicate. But there is another communication that's called the direct communication. And instead of this cell right here, and this cell right here, and you make a secretion, and the secretion travel and all that. Now, there are cells that are like this. They have a direct communication with each other, and we call that gap junction. Just because it's like this, ions go from one to one, okay? Transmitters go from one to one. So it is a direct communication for the adjacent cells. The next one is called paracrine. Para means neighbor or around. It's not like this. It's more like this. So I make secretion that fall into the other one. Just fall on it. It's not far away. It's not touched. It's right beside it. This is called paracrine. Okay, it moved from this, fall onto the next one. We call that paracrine. Okay, and these are minor exceptions, but we still have to know it. Direct, paracrine, endocrine, I talked about it, and synaptic transmission 233. Do you remember this synaptic transmission? When the action potential go all the way until the end, synaptic knob. Do you remember these models in 233, the brown, where acetylcholine leave and go to the next? And this is called the synaptic. And this is in the nervous system, and we call that neurotransmitters. But our focus is the endocrine system. Does it mean that we don't need to know? I wouldn't put it here. I told you this is a summary. So you have to know. So the endocrine cells versus the exocrine cells, ductless versus duct. Now, a couple more things to know. Something called amplification. When we have hormones that goes into the membrane of the cells, and this is not lipid soluble. They work on the receptor. Are we following? Receptor, G protein, second messenger, right? Okay. If you have small amount of hormones, the cells are going to amplify the effect. Okay? Like if you hear somebody talking and the rest of your family doesn't hear it, so you hear it from them, I'm delivering something. He is delivering something like this, so that everybody can hear it. It's amplify. So this is amplification, in which tiny amount of hormone result in making big amount of the second transmitter or second messenger, I mean, to magnify the response. Receptor cascade. Cascade means step after step after step. Not as simple as the lipid soluble. This one is basically one hormone make one or more. You told us there is a second messenger, one of the three. Yes, some of them can make more than one. Okay, instead of just making one, it can make two or three. We call that cascade. One after one, it can make more than one. The other thing is down regulation. And this is the opposite. If you have huge amounts or big amounts of the hormone, the cells are going to down regulate. If you have a small amount, you up regulate or you amplify. Big amounts, you down regulate. So how do you down regulate? If I see a lot of hormones coming to me, that's going to exhaust and it's going to have bad effects on me as a cell. So I don't want that to like what do you do when there is like you go all of a sudden in the sun? Don't you close your eyes to protect yourself? If you hear something that's very loud, don't you do like this to protect yourself? The cells are doing the same thing. If the hormone is too much and it's going to exhaust the resources of the cells will say, you know what? I'm going to decrease the amount of receptors so you don't overconsume me. And we call that down regulation. If a hormone is large amount, the receptors that are available will be less. We down regulate their effect. So we become less sensitive. The opposite is upregulation. If this hormone is not there, the receptors will increase in number available so that anything that comes, they catch it. Like if you're waiting for a signal and you don't hear anything, you'll be like a lot of us like going, trying to hear anything. There is nothing, there is no sound. So all of us will go like, if you hear anything, let us know, all of us, okay? This is called upregulation. If the hormone is not there or it's too tiny. When you release the hormones are released, go to the blood, and a lot of them are going to attach to a protein. Why do you do that? Because if you don't attach it to the protein, you will lose it. It will be removed from the bloodstream within an hour if it is free hormone. And that's why if you wanted a hormone to stay for longer time, you better attach it to something else. And we call that a transport protein, like steroids and thyroid hormones, for example. Same thing for, but this is not lipid soluble, so I'm not going to talk about it much, but it's the same idea. Do you want the hormone to work for an hour, or you want prolonged response? You want it to work more. If you just want it to work for an hour, it's free. Just leave it. The bloodstream will get rid of it. The body will get rid of it. If you want it to stay more than that, attach it to a protein. It's a transport protein. The transport protein will carry it and it will stay for a long time. Example here is thyroid and steroid hormone. Okay? You always want those two specifically to work for a longer time. Okay? You need thyroid hormones, for example, they give you like more heat that you want it the whole day long. So you can't like produce it and stay for an hour and leave. Your body will cool down and you cannot survive. So you want it to do extended period of time work. So what do you do? Thyroid and steroid, because you wanted them to work for long time, attach them to a transport protein. Okay? Okay, now we're talking about the endocrine system, and we should understand the hormones and how do they work. Is that clear? Do you guys have questions with this? Did you understand the concepts? This is what I'm going to ask you about, because these are the basics. I know it's a lot longer in the slides. This is good enough. Okay, if you got this, you got what you need to know, right? Okay, let's look at the bigger picture now. The endocrine system and every system in our body, we talked about the nervous system before in AP1, right? Do you remember the nervous system? We have the spinal cord that's doing work. And then we have the brain stem and diencephalon that's doing higher function. And then we have the brain that's higher. And then the president of the nervous system, which is the cortex. Do you remember this? The highest level is the cortex, isn't it? This is the president of the nervous system, the cortex. What is the president of the endocrine system? The hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is the top. This is the pyramid. Top of the pyramid is hypothalamus, the president. Under the president, the vice president is pituitary gland, anterior pituitary specifically, also known as hypophyseal gland. Should I remember both of them? Of course, you know that. Hypophyseal or adenohypophysis, this is the anterior pituitary gland. I have the president, I have the vice president, and then the rest of the glands are just workers. Is that clear? Okay, here is the president, hypothalamus. President give orders, right? I'm going to write orders. Let's say I'm the president, she is the vice president, and you guys are workers, the different glands, all right? I'm going to write orders. I'm the president here, and I want each one of you guys to do a job. So I'm going to write orders. I want the thyroid gland to produce thyroid hormone in this amount, okay? I write it down. The problem is thyroid gland does not understand what I mean. I write it in a language that's not understandable. So I will send it to my vice president, the pituitary gland, anterior pituitary. She will rewrite it in another way, understandable to her and understandable to everybody else. So my messages, my orders go to the glands? No, they won't understand it. They has to go to the vice president, and the vice president will rewrite it on his own way that they understand. So here is an example. I am writing an order to the thyroid gland to secrete their secretions. What's my order? Thyrotropin releasing hormone, TRH. What's thyrotropin means? thyroid. Tropin or trophic means to work, to increase, to secrete. So this is, I'm secreting something that's targeting the thyroid gland to work and secrete more. Does that go to the thyroid gland? The thyroid gland will not understand it. So what should I do now? I will send it to the anterior pituitary, also known as adenohypophysis. They will rewrite it in a way that the thyroid gland understand. What is that order now? TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. This is what go to the thyroid gland in this case. And the thyroid gland will say, okay, I got it, I understand it. I'm going to secrete my thyroid hormones. Is that clear? Same thing for everything. Here I am, the hypothalamus. I want adrenal cortex to secrete the cortisol because we need it. I'm going to write the order. What's the order? CRH, corticotropin releasing hormone. Translation. Cortico means cortex, referring to the adrenal cortex. Trophin, I think you understand now. Trophin, trophic, right? Stimulate, grow, secrete more, activate. Did you get it? So this is, I'm making a releasing hormone. A releasing hormone is an order. Releasing hormone. A hormone that will make you release. So it's an order. I'm making an order for the adrenal cortex to secrete. Does the adrenal cortex understand? No. I send it to my vice president, the anterior pituitary. They will rewrite it into ACTH, adrenocorticotrophic hormone. What's adrenocorticotrophic means? A big word. Yes, just cut it. Adrenocortical, the adrenal cortex, the cover of the adrenal gland. Do we know what's the adrenal gland? Adrenal, the gland that's above the kidney. Do you understand it? Don't take the words as it is. Adrenocorticotrophic, this is a big word. What does it mean? Yes, adrenocortico is the adrenal cortex, the cover of the gland above the kidney. Trophic, you know what's trophic now, right? So I will rewrite it into ASH, and this will go to the adrenal cortex, and the adrenal cortex will secrete its secretion, which is the cortisol, and so on. This and this, those two are for the gonads. 1, 2, 3, 4. These are for the gonads. Same idea. It's going to go to the adrenal cortex, and adrenal cortex will rewrite it. Okay, like here, corticotropin releasing hormone, go and you make FSH, and you make LH. And this will go to the reproductive organs. What are the organs? The primary organs. Testes in males and ovaries in females, right? And they are going to make their secretion as well. Not just the secretion in this case. They are going to make secretion and sperms, like in case of the testes, and ova in the case of ovaries. Okay? Okay, I'm going to stop here. And I think it's almost 20. So let me stop here.